Hi, Professor Hockley. This is my Silk Roads history timeline for my final exam essay. Just an overview. The Silk Roads were global land and sea trade routes that extended from the east to the west, and this timeline goes from before 300 BCE to 1400 CE. And goods were not the only things transferred along these routes. There was also the exchange of religions, disease, technology, language, culture, and ideas. Before 300 BCE, Buddhism started in around 600 BCE, and it was started by an Indian prince, Prince Siddhartha, and he taught people the path to enlightenment, and it became a major religion. Sericulture was only found in China at this time, and silk became a major commodity, and they used it as currency and for trade. And there was also the steppe versus the zone, which were two areas within China, and they built the Great Wall of China as a border between these two areas to keep the steppe from attacking the zone. But the Great Wall of China was also used to facilitate trade between them, and there was a lot of trans-ecological exchanges. The steppe had horses that the zone wanted, and so the zone would use their silk to trade for the horses. And there was also jade. The Chinese valued jade a lot, like it was more valuable than gold, and so they were pushing further into the steppe, into the mountain regions, to try and find more jade. From 300 BCE to 600 CE, the Han Dynasty was around this time, and they would have marriage alliances, which they would use as treaties between the zone and the steppe, and this helped create families, and it helped protect the zone areas from other clans on the steppe. And they also encouraged trade and growth of the Silk Road routes. The Kushan Empire conquered much of Central Asia, the Persian Empire, and India, and they unified many unstable kingdoms by using satrapas, and this helped solidify the region. And they also patronized all religions, and they did that as a ruling strategy. Alexander the Great conquered land from Macedonia to the coast of India and down into Egypt. And so goods started spreading from the east to the west, and Romans discovered silk, and so it began flowing over the trade routes to the Mediterranean. And then also Greek influences started spreading toward the east. And then still in 300 BCE to 600 CE, Constantinople was established as the Roman capital, and sericulture technology spread after the fall of the Han Dynasty, and it spread into Constantinople when Justinian was the ruler. Some traveling monks took the secrets, and so they were able to make their own silk. And then purple-colored silks became the most expensive and prestigious clothing for men and women in the Byzantine Empire. Oasis towns sprang up along Silk Road routes, and Sogdian traders would use these towns from China to Rome for regional trade. And the Sogdians also would take Chinese silk and they would unweave it, and then they would reweave it back into their own silk patterns, because they didn't know how to make the silk, but they wanted their own patterns, and so they would unweave the threads and then reweave them back. And also the Sogdians became the middlemen on the Silk Road routes. Muhammad creates the Islamic religion. He became a political and spiritual leader in Medina, and then the Muslims conquered a large portion of Eurasia and Africa. And then Buddhism continued to spread at this time. It helped increase commerce. There was a lot of monasteries built along the Silk Road routes, and travelers and merchants would stop there to pray, to make donations to bodhisattvas, and to earn merit for heaven so that they could ensure their place in heaven. So then from 600 CE to 1200 CE, the Tang Dynasty was ruling in China, and they created sumptuary laws to monopolize the production of and use of the best silk textiles for political purposes. They also imitated the Byzantine Empire and made purple the color of royalty, and this was also considered the golden age of the Silk Road routes. The Battle of Taos River happened in 751, which was the Abbasid Empire versus the Tang Dynasty, and the Tang Dynasty lost. So the Islamic army took a lot of the Chinese prisoners back to Baghdad with them, and the prisoners taught the Abbasids how to perfect their sericulture. Later on, the Turkish slaves organized and took over the Abbasid Empire, and then they created caravanserais, which were resting spots along the Silk Road routes, and travelers and government officials would use these to refresh as they were traveling. And then during the end of the Tang Dynasty, toward the end of the late Tang Dynasty, they started trying to get foreign influences out of China. Well, then the Tang Dynasty fell and the Song Dynasty took over, and they really they pushed against Buddhism and they banned foreign influences, and they established Confucianism as China's official religion. From 1200 to 1400 CE, this is when Genghis Khan came into the picture, and he rose to power and conquered much of Central Asia. And then the Mongol Empire allowed for relatively open trade and freedom of religion. And then one of his successors, Ogarai Khan, established Karakorum as the Mongol capital. And trade routes were a lot safer and taxes were reduced. And then another successor, Kublai Khan, he extended the Mongol Empire down into China. During the same time period, European expansion was happening, and then the Mongol Empire started to collapse. The nature of trade started to change, and then the plague happened also during this time, which was the Black Death, and it spread from the east to the west, and they weren't really sure how it was spreading. They knew it was correlating with travelers on the Silk Road routes, and so towns started to shut down to commerce to try and prevent the sickness from spreading anymore. And then also at this time, sea routes became really popular, and they started eclipsing the Silk Road land routes because they reduced the friction of distance for goods to travel. And it was also easier to ship bulk goods overseas than it was to take them overland. And so things like tea and porcelain and just things they wanted to ship a lot of, it was easier to ship them overseas and a lot quicker. And then porcelain became a bigger export than silk from China. And then in conclusion, the Silk Roads were central to the transfer of trade, technology, culture, ideas, religions, language, and disease. And as people and technologies advanced, land routes were replaced by sea routes. For 1700 plus years, these routes facilitated trade within China, Central Asia, Africa, and the Mediterranean. And that's it. The end. Thanks for a great semester. I learned a lot. I hope you enjoyed.